usually meant that we ended up using lighting more conventionally by allowing the light to travel and to light elsewhere. Opera lighting utilizes a similar strategy, but the move from external to internal focalization is usually carried exclusively by the user. So it is very easy for the light to get stuck in a function that sits below a meaningful structure, that is purely illustrative, that is not concerned with truth, but with space and time as abstract concepts, disconnected from notions of truth and meaning. So this arguably is one reason for scenography's resistance in the operatic form to develop forward and to embrace change, to focus on space as a single scenographic environment, and the reliance on music to carry the narrative transition between internal and external focalization. There are attempts at challenging this, of course, particularly in Central Europe. Barikowski's work, often with Klaus Grünberg as scenographer at the Komische Oper in Berlin, is clearly infused by a clear intention to break the scenographic norm outlined above. So here is so Barikowski's Zauberflöte, which was at the Edinburgh Festival this summer, and it's a few years old now, which he did at the Komische Oper, is a really brilliant example, I think, of trying to break away from this idea of the single framed image. You know, one image per act in the opera tradition is so often used. And you know, it's extremely busy. It moves the gaze. You know, it uses video strongly for the move from internal to external focalization. And then, of course, Barikowski is just a premiere who knows at Covent Garden, and it's his first production here, and it's really worth seeing. You really notice it's an utterly different scenography to anything you know we are used to seeing in this country particularly. And what you can't see in the picture, but Klaus Grünberg is this, it uses a sort of cinematic shuttering mechanism that opens and closes at the proscenium arch to help us see. So it's a really very powerful example of this attempt at breaking away from the single image and making an often a dynamic scenography that is dramaturgical and that uses light and vision to carry narrative. Opera's reluctance to be truthful can be compounded by the form's highly hierarchical structure. Here is an excerpt from an interview with the composer and theatre maker Hansjorg Schmidt, where he reflects on what had influenced him at the start of his career. So here's an interview with Hansjorg Schmidt, who very much started as a composer and then now is a very prolific theatre maker. Again, collaborates closely with Klaus Grünberg, as does Barikowski. And this is an interview which I did with him in the spring for a research project here at the Library of Light, which is concerned with archiving lightworks. So Heine was interviewed for that. So it's going to work. A couple of minutes.
Came after each other. And of course, your was a fourth theatre.
Can you hear it? It's quiet. Is somebody here to do? I'm just trying to do it while you.
Learned how not to do it, because I was working with other directors and I was not always, if at all, content and happy with the overall result. But I learned a lot about theatre. I learned a lot about giving away the chances of the individual art forms which are involved in theatre. Because these, in the 70s and 80s, were very authoritarian directors. Some of them in a very obvious way, screaming, and some in another way, but basically authoritarian in the hierarchical way, not only how they work with collaborators, but also how they treated the art forms. And I grew up, or I composed for directors in a time where light came always as the very last thing. He rehearsed in a horrible rehearsal space without anything, without costumes, without set design, and then we came on stage, and then the set design came, the costumes came in the last week, and then there was maybe 2 or 3 lighting days. So it was really learning how you should not do it, how you exclude the chance that all the involved art forms, and in theater, or in music theater even more, it is a very complex collaboration, not only socially in the team, but also artistically in how the elements cooperate with each other, or how they discuss with each other, how light can add or can take away something, how stage design can be a force by itself, and not only illustration of a decor. So it was basically learning ex negativo, and not only noticing how music was giving away just as an element in between scenes or in the background. I mean, I composed for many Shakespeare plays, for example, maybe 10 minutes of music for a 4-hour play. So you get an idea of how is the relationship. And I basically hated theater, not only in the way these art forms like set design, costume design, like the space itself, like light, were treated, but also in the way how language were treated. And I withdraw myself then from theater.
Right. So how can we fix this? How can we propose an approach to visual scenography for opera that allows for a realignment? An approach to lighting that is meaningful and organic, as we've seen in Kursk and Stifterstinger, and an approach that challenges hierarchies and structures. In Hypernormalization, the documentary filmmaker Adam Curtis argues that we accept systems that are fake or that are not working because we cannot think of an alternative. He used the Soviet Union just before its collapse in the 80s as an example. So a failing system or world becomes the norm. He also talks about the internet as an engineering system, something that looks to the past and then offers us what it thinks we and many others want. It is a very effective system that can easily be confused with content. So the Arab Spring works brilliantly because social media, the internet, can bring people together rapidly to express their anger at an entrenched system. But then the movement fizzles out because there's no content, no vision for what to do next. It's quite similar in opera. Opera is a very efficient engineering system. It has to be due to its size. And as the internet, opera's engineering system can get confused with content, with a vision for the future. And this lack of a vision means that there is no pressure for technological innovation, and hence scenography in opera remains stuck in the 19th century form. As Goebbels points out, often this is compounded by opera's tendency to think in layers. The music comes first, then the staging blocking, then the set, then the light, all stacked on top of each other and quite disconnected, so there's no space to create a shared vision. Tellingly, the most interesting advances of the form happen in countries with very well-subsidized theatres where there's time to break the engineering model and introduce, for example, a week-long lighting blotting session, or to make opera away from the opera houses. Just as a final example, I just want to show a clip from a Robert Wilson production of Adam's Passion, and then briefly talk about it afterwards. that's a really good example of all the things we've touched on, is that the use of light for focalization, so the front lighting of just the heads for, for internal monologue, the use of silhouette, for external, for showing action, very powerfully used in the production. The use the light is the light is interwoven into an organic part. The light responds to the actors or the singer's movement and tone of voice. Interestingly, to do this, they had to put it into an old sort of Cold War aircraft hangar in Estonia, because they couldn't do this in an opera house because of the engineering system. So to make the time to develop the lighting, and the sonography as a whole for the piece, that had to quite physically move it away from an opera house. And that also brings interesting things with it, like the catwalk and the chorus at the back rather than, on stage. So as soon as you do that, it really liberates and it allows you to play the form, in a way that's really there. And it's I think really useful illustration of all the points raised. That's it. Thank you very much.
So we have time for one or two questions.
Yeah, before I have a question, I